This is Roy with Kick a Legend and welcome to my Thai pad holding video. If you haven't already, download the free ebook off of kickoflegend.com where all you have to do is register for the website. It'll serve as a useful guide to take you through this video and you can refer back to it, take notes, and store it on your mobile device. The overarching goal of this video is to help you develop your own style of Thai pad holding. Different days will have different requirements, and whether that's conditioning, developing speed and power, rhythm, timing, distance, without your own conceptual framework, it'll be hard to adapt to all of that because you can't just memorize every single possible drill. The goal here is by taking you through first from the simple holds to the simple combos to more exotic holds, you'll develop your own sense of how to hold and when to use which variation for each situation, whether that's the angling or the relative difference in size, the relative difference in height. Everything you're going to have to adapt to suit to your situation, so I hope this video helps you develop that. Why Thai pad holding? Well, I feel it's critical to help us as martial artists get better. So not only will you be a better workout partner, but being a better Thai pad holder, better people will want to work with you, which will help you get better faster. You're going to find that once you develop a reputation as being the guy that can hold for anyone and hold well, all the advanced guys are going to want to work with you, which is great because it helps you get better faster and helps you be a better training partner and a better member of the community. Further, holding pads well will help you develop your own attributes. You'll learn to read distance, read timing, you'll learn to find holes in your partner's defense, a lot of things that you can develop on the holding side of the equation, as well as the intentionality about the drills. It's easy to just kind of walk through things and not really focus too hard. If you're holding intentionally, it allows you to develop your own attributes while you're training your partner, and that intentionality helps you develop your partner better. So what are the responsibilities of a good Thai pad holder? First of all, you have to know the conventions of the place you're training in. For example, the number 4 can refer to an uppercut, can refer to an overhand right, can refer to the right hook. Depends on where you are, so you have to make sure you understand those conventions. Secondly, keep the drill on task. A lot of times, especially recreational martial artists, they come to just socialize and relax from the day and do recognize when that's all they're looking for. But even so, if they start socializing too much and not working on the drill, you have to keep it focused. Related to that is also sometimes just people want to just work on what they're good at, so they don't want to work on something new, which maybe is what the drill of the day is. Keep them focused at the task at hand so that they can develop their overall game. Thirdly, you have to be the motivator, right? You're holding the pads, you have to encourage the hitter to perform well. So I believe in strictly positive reinforcement. Negative reinforcement just makes the hitter mad, which doesn't really serve a lot of purpose. You can encourage the hitter, tell them they're doing a good job, and then give them constructive feedback. Don't overwhelm the hitter with feedback, right? Especially a beginner, of course there's tons of things they have to work on. An advanced person has tons of things they have to work on. Pick a couple things that you think are critical that day. One thing is if you're developing a particular attribute that day, criticize or give feedback on those aspects related to that attribute that you're focused on. So if you're working on defense, make sure you're checking their defense, encouraging them to keep their hands up, keep the shoulder up when they're coming back from the punch, but maybe leave off some of the other feedback you could be giving regarding their footwork or how they're developing their speed or something. It's too much information for any given session. Lastly, it's your job to push the hitter to challenge themselves. So if they've mastered the basic body mechanics, it's up to you now to figure out how to further develop them and what they need the most work on. The obvious things after checking defense is changing the range, changing the angle, changing the rhythm and timing. So maybe they're very good at left kick, right cross, left hook, but then you want to develop their sense of when they have to march forward after that left kick, when they have to retreat, when they have to circle out, when they have to jump ship because you started your counterattack. Lots of ways to advance even basic drills, and it's your job to push the hitter forward by continually challenging them. Again, not everyone wants that every day. Sometimes people after a hard day at work just want to forget their troubles and smash the pads, and please respect that. But on any given day when someone's feeling good and they're focused and ready to get to work, make sure that as a good holder, you're pushing them to develop themselves rather than allowing them to just walk through the drill. Now that being said, I hope you enjoy this video and we'll see you on the other side. So our basic neutral starting position is going to be from our Thai stance. For those who do different styles, anything relatively square will serve you well, as that allows you to switch the hold from side to side very quickly. I'm keeping my arms hanging down naturally, pads pretty much horizontal to the ground, tips of the pads touching each other for some stability. My hands are relaxed. It's important not to keep a death grip on the pad, as that will wear you out very quickly. In fact, if I've been hitting that day and I had hand wraps on, I'll keep them on for a little bit of extra support. Now, just a quick overview for those who don't know, basic Thai stance, I'm facing my partner, so my hips and my chest are square. My left foot is pointed straight forwards, my right toe behind my left heel line pointed out at a 45-degree angle. So this means that my partner is not hitting. If we're doing a drill where the partner is allowed to initiate a round kick, I can move it to the appropriate side very quickly. Otherwise, this basically means my partner's waiting for me to flash the pad to show him what to do next, or for me to verbally call something out. From here, I'm constantly moving with my partner, facing him in my fighting stance, so I'm always working on my own footwork, learning to read his movement, learning to read his body language so that I learn to know when he's about to initiate attack, when he's about to take a step. This constant observation and adjustment is how I develop my own abilities and technique while holding for someone else, and is a critical part to developing your own art. The important thing is to always follow him around with intent, right? So either he's maintaining distance with me, right, and I'm kind of feeding the movement, or I'm maintaining pressure and distance on him, depending on the focus of the drill. But the key thing here is to always maintain a fighting stance and focus and moving with proper footwork, rather than just kind of lazily swilling around and flashing a pad. It does you no good. So make sure that when you're holding, you're getting your own quality time in, and you do that by holding with intent. So let's start with the basic holds. We'll start with the punch holds. By the way, I have my shirt off so that you can see how I hold the pads relative to the landmarks on my body. So, for the jab, I'm going to hold the left pad up, and I'm going to angle my body to the right. You see how I'm leaning towards my right and turning it a little bit so that my tricep is braced against my lat and that my elbow joint is comfortably compressed, so that when the punch lands, it just bends into the muscle rather than outstretched where there's a lot of angle for it to move. So it's comfortably braced, elbow joint compressed, tricep against the lat. I'm leaning to my right so I can put the target a little bit more in the center line. Remember, the objective of pad holding is to simulate striking your opponent as closely as possible, and part of that is calculating the range based off the cue by having that focus in my chest area. So if my partner is more or less at correct distance, I want to compensate to put the pad as close to the button of my chin as I reasonably can. So I'm going to lean to my right and lean back a little bit, so that if you see from the side, this would be without any lean. You see there's quite a bit of distance between my chin and the pad. By leaning right and back a little bit, I put it considerably closer. So that's just for the single high jab. Similarly, for the cross, I have my arm compressed, tricep braced against the lat, and because my right foot is back in my Thai stance and I'm naturally angled that way, you'll notice that the hold for the cross is much more naturally in the plane of my face, which is wonderful. So, single jab hold, single cross hold. You see I'm kind of angling the other way for the cross. Now, because the right cross can come in very strongly, I'll sometimes open my body up. So if this is a pure square Thai stance, I can hold with the cross like this, but I'll tend to open my body just ever so slightly so that the target is still where I want it to be, but I have a little bit more structure to give back into the punch. So for both the jab and the cross, if they're hard hitters, I'm going to push forward a little bit into the punch, but as little as possible to give them a good feedback and to preserve my own joints. So I'm going to try to push it forwards as little as possible, ideally no farther than the front of my foot at the most. For the cross, because the punch is harder, I may have to push back a little bit more. So I'm going to present the target at correct range and push with my hips, which is connected to my shoulder and elbow because it's braced against my body. So I'm not using my arm, I'm using my entire body to push back into the punch. And if the punch is coming in hard, I might have to meet it a little bit more. I might have to let this decompress slightly, depending on how hard they're hitting. Alternatively, if they're punching very hard or if they're punching through the target, because that's what the drill calls for, I may want to let this fly open. And to do that, one, I need to be relaxed in the shoulder joint and chest. And two, I want to be a little bit more open now so that my joint has space to do that. If I'm very square, this becomes very hard and I have to rotate my upper body anyway. By being slightly more open, I can do this more naturally. And of course, I can combine the two ideas. I can push forward to meet the punch, and if it's still coming through very strongly, I let it fly open. So work with that and see what works best for you. For the low line punches, I can either hold just out to the side like this, so my tricep is braced against the side of my body, my pad is more or less touching my hip bone, and I can either just wave it forwards a little bit or just hold it there and brace it against my body. If it's coming very hard, again, I just let it flow through. You have to be careful with the rotator cuff, but quite frankly, most people don't put through a low jab that really wrecks this joint. And same with the low cross, I open up a little bit more so that if I have to give with it, I let it go. You notice that on both of these, the pad is angled slightly towards the center because the punch is coming across the center line, so he gets to hit a nice flush target. Alternatively, I can brace like this, and then he can just hit center line. This is really good for drills that require the punch to be delivered down the center because of the nature of the follow-up techniques. So you can do this. This is just braced against my belly. I will flex my abs on impact, and I can also sometimes give it a little bit forwards if I'm not feeling comfortable that day and I don't want to feel that kind of impact on my midsection. I can also give it a little bit, but more or less this is just braced here. And of course, it does work on your ab conditioning a little bit. So that's the jab and cross. If I want to hold 1-2, I tend to hold single pad and use the cross hold because really fast and then moving into a third punch, this is both unrealistic because you're asking your partner to crisscross fairly dramatically. This, they're slightly off center because it's not where my head is, but at least they can deliver straight down the line in rapid succession. So for combination punching, especially for the basic 1-2, I like to hold it like this. For conditioning, I'll sometimes hold the crisscross because conditioning, you're kind of working on a different focus, and this crisscross motion can be good when you're just trying to get a sweat in and get that workout in. And when I'm holding that from conditioning, I'm again going to be moving it as little as possible, but then using my hip rotation to hit into the pads a little bit rather than swinging them out like this, swinging them out like this. Still as little motion as possible, especially if they're blitzing, because when they're blitzing, they're not hitting that hard anyway. So again, you have this for the high cross, this or this for the low cross. Now you see the center of the pad is just slightly below my chin level. for me, this is a reasonable compromise for me to hold with my maximum structure and being relatively close to the target, which is just on the button here where my chin is. If you're in a certain band of correct height, I prefer to hold more or less what's best for me because no one's fighting someone exactly the same height as them anyway. However, if there's a large height difference, I will hold higher, and we'll talk about that in a second, or I'm going to bend my legs to hold lower. This can get a little tiring, and I will tend to widen my stance and make it longer so that I can better absorb the shots and have less fatigue with my legs. For the hooks, one little pet peeve of mine is people who hold hooks out here. The punch is coming for this side of my head, so I want to hold it ideally here, but that's both a little bit unsafe for me and unsound for my own body. So I'm going to hold center line. I'm going to, for the single hook, lean back slightly so that, again, it's a little bit more in line with where the plane of my face would be. And I'm holding it center line because it's a reasonable compromise between holding it like this and holding it like this. Center line, my tricep, once again, is braced against my lats. And then if it's a very strong hook, I'm going to, again, rotate my body like I'm throwing my own proper left hook. And that's going to get the impulse needed. And of course, if they're stepping through with this massive hook or slap, I can let it go, and this, I'll have to rotate my body to let it go naturally. But this is your basic high line hold. This is your basic low line hold. And same for the right side, fairly straightforward. If you're going to hold jab, cross, hook, you make a box. So this is close to my face. This is near the center line, but you notice I can still look through the pads so I can see what's going on. It is worth noting that if I'm holding very tight, I actually can't see the right side of his body entirely. So you do have to be careful when you're working with someone who holds very tightly for your own benefit. For the shovel hooks, lots of different ways to hold this with Thai pads. You can just do single pad hold braced against your body. So like this. And like this. So the punch is going to be coming in. These are extra thick Thai pads, so I have a considerable amount of padding to absorb even a fairly hard shot. Sometimes I'll hit into it. Again, if I don't feel like feeling anything on my belly that day, I can hit into it and then let my hitter ramp up the power until I figure out how much give I have to give in order to preserve myself and give him good feedback. If I really want to pad that hook, I can brace it double. So I'm not bracing it on this side of my body. I'm just holding it like this in front of my body, and this one is braced against my body. So the disadvantage of holding like this is it's a little bit lower, but it does give me more resistance. You can also hold for the shovel hooks like this, just across the body at a diagonal. So the advantage of this is it gives me a certain amount of precision for how high I hold it and how far left and right I want to hold it, but it's in front of my body. The advantage of this is it's closer to the plane of my body, but I have a little bit less accuracy in terms of the up and down because I'm limited just by my own body getting in the way. So play with that and see what works for you. Shovel hooks, like this, or like this. For the uppercuts, for the very vertical uppercut, you hold it pretty much like this. Now, I don't like holding it in front of my face because I can't see what's going on. So I'll lean back slightly so that I can look over the top of my pad. Remember, for the high uppercut, we're simulating the bottom of the chin. So I'm making a mild compromise just so that I can still see what's going on. And I'm going to hit down into it. So I'm going to use my shoulder muscle and lever about my elbow, but also drop my weight a little bit. If they're uppercutting like Mike Tyson, again, this might just fly up after the initial impact. It's very important to give impulse into those uppercuts. It's very unnatural and uncomfortable feeling to hit uppercuts expecting resistance of the pad, and then your partner's just letting it fly through. You'll see this more with focus mitts. With Thai pads, the natural weight gives a little bit more, but you do want to give resistance because ideally your hitter is putting their leg power and coming up into that shot. They need to feel some kind of resistance. So you have this for the uppercut, you have this for the midline uppercut. You can also hold, again, diagonal for the midline uppercut into the body. If they're hitting hard, this is not going to be super comfortable. So again, I can give it a little bit, or I can even double up, lean back and hold it a little bit higher so that at least they're hitting at the correct height. You can also just hold it like this. So from the side, it looks like this. And this would tend to be for the right uppercut, so it's coming slightly across the line. And so you notice this is very similar to my shovel hook holds, right? A lot of uppercuts are not these vertical shots. They're diagonal, they're forwards. So we have to accommodate exactly what angle we're working on that day. So this is good, again, tricep braced against my body for a diagonal uppercut to the body line, and then I'll move it back a little bit so my elbow's closer to my hip to get it closer to my body if the punch isn't coming so hard that it's causing it to hurt my body in some way. For other shots, such as the overhand right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cross my center line apparently with my elbow pretty much in the center, but maybe slightly across. And again, I'm bracing my tricep against my chest this time so that it has a solid surface to hit against. And I'm going to lean back slightly so that I both protect my face in case the punch glances off the pad a little bit, but also so that I can put my body in the correct hitting line that my hitter is expecting. Now, this of course is slightly lower than the temple, which tends to be the target, but I find this hold a little bit awkward. It's kind of torquing my shoulder, so I'd rather hold correct left-right alignment and a little low than correct height and off to my right, because this is still stressful on my shoulder and rotator cuff. So I'd rather make the compromise for height and have a little more safety for my body and also allow him to hit a little harder. So for the overhand right, for the overhand left. So for example, a very popular combination might be something like low jab or low jab, overhand right, uppercut left. So you notice these pads are almost in the same position, except one's with my right facing upward into my left, and one's with my left facing downward into my right. Or I might turn this over, or I might do a cross hold a little lower, or I might double it up to this position for just a simple jab, overhand right, left, shovel hook. You see there are many ways to hold the same thing depending on what you're comfortable with and what you're trying to accomplish with your partner. So holding for the Thai kick, I'm going to hold from my basic Thai stance. So regardless of which side the kick is coming in from, I'm still facing my partner. Tips of the pads together. Remember, no death grip on the pads. Elbows braced against my body lightly. The kick is coming at a 45-degree angle relative to me, both right to left as well as downwards to upwards. So this pad is going to be at more or less a 45-degree tilt, except off to the side of my body. When the kick comes in, I'm going to absorb it by the triceps into the core of my body. If the kick is particularly powerful, I can give it a slight impulse, and then the kick will then follow through again into my body, or it will bounce off depending on how your kicker kicks. But basically, the most comfortable for the hitter is for you to just allow the thickness of the thigh pads to absorb the impact, and then allow the elbow braced against your body to avoid the problem of the kick hitting the pads into you. The slight touch at the top and the brace here gives you a triangle framework, which is a fairly strong frame, so that it also prevents the pads from coming up like this. You don't want to hold the pads vertically like this because one, that's the incorrect kicking angle. Also, you're prone to have the pads come up and fly into your face like this. You don't want them vertical like this because then the kicker will have to kick horizontally. Remember, the principle of perpendicularity, we want the pad to be perpendicular to the line of the attack. Since the line of the attack is upwards diagonally, I'm going to hold downwards diagonally, like so, and like so. If your kicker is kicking at a slightly different height, I tend to lower the level of my body if I have to go lower, right? Rather than holding like this, because now the angle is incorrect regardless of height. We want to preserve the angle, but lower the body. For those of you who do silat, maybe a little bit of this would be good for your harimau, but I prefer to hold like this because it's just structurally more correct. For someone who's kicking high, it's easier to hold higher, and I may hold the pad slightly more vertically because it's difficult to hold like this. So a high kicker might not get the exact angle, but still not vertical, right? It's still tilted like this, still braced against my body. It's just not down at the most comfortable position. For the head kicks, you can hold up like this, head hidden behind the thigh pads, right? You want to make sure there's some space between the pad and your head. More importantly, you want to be taking most of the force against your outside shoulder, right? So this is the pad that ultimately stops the kick if you're talking about the right kick. This is the pad that ultimately stops the kick if you're talking about the left high kick. And so therefore, my body won't allow this to really hit my head. My whole body will fly back before this structure gives in and hits me in the head. This thigh pad though might give, so it's there for support and to give the hitter something comfortable to hit. But it's the outside pad on the high kick line that protects you. Or if you want the hitter to feel something more on the inside pad, you have to be considerably more aggressive to cut off the power so that the chances of this happening are lower. Now, this thigh pad holding video is focused on holding without auxiliary gear. I don't recommend using thigh pads for low kicks in general. If you want to give your partner a visual cue, I'll hold this like this so that my forearm is along my thigh and my fist is gently along the kind of diagonal front of my thigh, presenting a target like so, just so they get used to kicking the leg and they have a sense of how high up and down they should be kicking. For most leg kicks though, I'll just ask them to not drill my legs because this is not a full power hold, right? Anyone who kicks even moderately hard will blast through this and damage my leg or buckle my position. So even if I've lowered my weight and have this leg nice and bent to absorb the kick, I'm not really interested in holding for hard kicks like this. So at that point, I'd almost rather just not hold anything at all, ask them to hit with control so that we can move on to the next shot quickly. So for example, right kick, left hook, I'd have to go all the way from here to here. Well, that's challenging. Not if I just take the kick on my leg and the pad's already here to start the combination with. So you can present this. I'm not a huge fan of it, but I put this here as an option. Similarly, for the front kick across the thighs, some people will hold the pads like this to give a target. It is true with two pads you can absorb a little bit more, but you can't absorb the amount of impact someone your own size and weight can put across your thighs with a thigh kick, right? You don't want to be absorbing full blast this, but it does allow the hitter to put a little bit more into it. Again, personally, I prefer to ask them to hit with control and just put nothing there. Holding for the teeps. Basic teep hold, I prefer like this. So your bottom pad is horizontal, your top pad is kind of stacked on top like this, and the hitter is essentially trying to hit the lower half of the top pad, or almost kind of in the seams. And I'm either absorbing the kick, so if it's more of a pushing style kick, that kick is going to send my body backwards, but my own body weight and a slight impulse with my elbows forward will give the hitter resistance. If it's more of a striking kick, it's not going to push me back, it's going to try to put a dent in the pads, and so I'm either going to absorb this on my abs, or if I don't like that, push forward slightly with my elbows. High teep, I'll actually just hold like for the right cross. If I don't trust their accuracy, maybe a little bit farther out. Low teep, so just teep to the leg or something, I can present across the front like this, but again, I almost prefer for them to just train accurately and lightly. Side teep and other things like that, again, kind of like this. If we're worried about the blade of the foot coming through, we can turn the pads so that the foot is not parallel to the seam in the pad, so the likelihood of it going through is considerably lower, right? So this is good for when the foot is vertical. This is good when the foot is diagonal or horizontal, because holding absolutely vertical is just awkward, so this is a good compromise. Another note on holding for kicks, some people like to hold the pads very wide. When you have the belly protector on, this is a natural consequence of that, because the belly protector actually just gets in the way. You can't hold as tightly as you can as if you weren't wearing one. But if you weren't wearing one, I feel this is an ideal hitting position. When your pads get wide, the outside corners of your pads define the surface, and so the kick has to come in perfectly parallel to the surface of the pads, or you're going to feel one of the corners of the pads potentially biting into the shin. If the pads are a little bit closer, you're not going to have that phenomenon. Also, don't cave in the pads. You have the same problem. The corners of the pads now are digging into the kick. Hold them flat and not too wide apart, and it gives the hitter a very comfortable surface without having to deal with unnecessary constraints or kind of bumps and pains from the corners of the pads biting into their legs. So now let's talk about holding for the elbows. A lot of the elbow shots are similar to holds we've already examined. The horizontal elbow, just like for the left hook or the right hook. The key here is we really want to allow our hitter to be very close to us to simulate that sense of being tight in that hitting with elbows requires. It may be true that in application or fighting that you lean for the elbow just to get that shot, but when we're working on our body mechanics, we want our hitter to get used to just how close they really have to stand to hit with proper mechanics, which means they're very close to our body. So we're going to lean our head back slightly to allow them to hit with that sense of closeness, but still give us a little bit of margin for safety. So horizontal elbow like this, upwards diagonal, downwards diagonal, and similarly from the front. And then I'm going to lean back for those. For the chopping straight elbows, I can hold like this, which I prefer if they can hit accurately, because now they have a solid target. The pad is braced against my chest, and I can just absorb this, and he has a nice solid target to hit into. Like with the uppercuts, hitting elbows into low or no resistance feels very awkward when we're expecting something to be resisting the impact. I can also hold for the chopping elbow similar to the right cross, but maybe a little bit farther out if I'm concerned for my safety. Kind of some of the more exotic elbows, such as kind of the upwards diagonal, I can again hold like this if I trust my partner, or hold cross if the impact is coming like this, so that on the miss it goes this way, as opposed to this where the miss comes into my center line. This will go to the outside of my center line. So the basic knee hold, I'm going to hold with my elbow again braced against my body at a 45-degree angle for the forwards knee. And then I can brace behind like this. Alternatively, you can clip this here and hold like this as for the teep, right? Except rather than make it very vertical with this pad, make it a little bit more angled, again, so that you're intercepting the knee at the correct angle. I find this allows you to absorb more power. And while ideally you switch sides for, use your left for his right, your right for his left, sometimes if you really press for time, just a slight angle with your hip, and you can catch both as long as they also make a minor adjustment. For the clinch knees, if he takes the full-on Thai clinch, so he's buried my head into his shoulder, and he throws the knee, you notice that he doesn't have as much runway, right? So while this is very good for your fight training, one, as a casual pad holder, you're not always interested in getting your neck wrenched, but two, it actually doesn't develop his ability to generate power from the clinch, as well as hands on the shoulder at full extension. Now, if you need, that's actually the correct distance, right? When no pads in the tight clinch, that's about the same if he's really going for the target. So that's why for developing attributes such as power generation, I actually like holding a little bit farther, especially if you're not doing a lot of fight training. There's a time for that, right? Clinch sparring, for example, right? But sometimes if we're just looking at how do we develop power from the hips, from the coming up from our calves and getting up onto our toes if we're doing that kind of kneeing, sometimes that full extension knee is a better way to do things. The diagonal knee, so if Josh takes my outside position and throws the diagonal knee in, right, that's a nice solid target for him to hit. So it's the exact same hold as this, except now rotated this way. For the curved knees, the Thai pads, especially these extra large ones, not my favorite thing to do, right? You can hold it like this. And it's pretty safe, right? Even going casually, because Josh is a pretty strong guy, that's already starting to dent my shoulder a little bit because my fist ends up braced against the shoulder. So this isn't my favorite thing, but not a bad thing, but really the heavy bag is the better tool for that, right? If you want to work on your technical curved knees, clinch sparring again, right? This might not be the best way to develop power, but sometimes in the course of a class, you just want to give the student an opportunity to hit a little bit harder without, everyone line up on the heavy bags. Maybe you don't have enough, right? It's not a bad alternative, right? You just cross like this. You notice you're going to have a natural way you want to cross, but, and then again, you can hold for this for the low knees. You're going to get a Charlie horse pretty fast as soon as one comes in at the wrong angle and pushes your fist into the knee, right? You notice I'm putting my fist in front so that if you were to hit it, it doesn't in general happen. But every now and again, he's just going to put one in at the wrong angle, or it's going to torque your arm a little bit. So again, not my favorite thing, but some options if you want to give them a larger hitting surface. And I suppose for the flying knees, it's the exact same thing, right? Just depending on what height you want. It's just this cross structure. And then so if Josh comes in with flying knee, right? I can vary the height just depending on how he wants to put it in. So now that we've seen kind of how to hold in a vacuum, we're going to see how you learn how to hold with someone hitting and kind of what micro adjustments you need based on the exact angle we're working on. So we're going to go through with single direct attack first. Remember, jab, right? I'm just kind of holding off to the side, leaning back to present a good target. I'm just going to throw that. And then to double up, same pad. So whereas with the focus mitts, I might hold two, right? Which isn't a bad cue if that's the convention your gym uses, right? I can just hold like this. The thing I don't like about it is it's hard to transition. But if we're working on verbal list cues, not a bad way. And then right cross, same thing, right? Just like the hold before. Now, if he's really drilling it, again, I might need to go with it if I just find my shoulder can't take it. Or I can really put it in and stand my ground. But even if, I'm kind of matching him, if you're holding for strong hitters 6 hours a day, it's going to start tearing you up. So once you start feeling fatigue, you may just want to, he still feels a good target, right? I still give him that moment of resistance, but I preserve myself a little bit, but he can still hit hard. It doesn't feel like he's hitting air all of a sudden. Or if he wants to step through, so let's say he throws it from too close, because we're just working on that. Maybe it's a self-defense context or something, right? And he just wants to really blast it through. I can't hold it there even if I wanted to, so I have to let it go.
Sure.
Low cross, this one, right? So I'm gonna flex my abs when he does this, but again, if it becomes too much, I give it a little bit. Or I can hold it out here if I really want nothing to do with that. And you notice, again, I've opened up my body rather than stand absolutely square, because this becomes a really weird angle for the rotator cuff. Right, low jab, same thing. And that's it for pretty much the straight punches. If there's a big height difference, you're going to have to hold a little higher, and that's probably going to mean you're going to have to hit into it a little bit more, because it's going to be required to preserve your shoulders. So let's pretend I was a little bit shorter here, and I'm holding double jab. Okay, I might have to hit into it a little bit. For the cross still, right? Just to preserve my shoulders, because it's really hard to do this, right? It's just bad for you. If there's just a minor height difference, I recommended that you kind of stay in your stance. It benefits your own training. But I can make up a few inches just by standing a little taller, right? So my structure relative to my own body is the same. It's just rather than being kind of in this squatted Thai stance, I gain maybe an inch or two just from standing upright. Something to think about.
Sure.
The hooks, right? Again, we're holding in the center line, right? I like kind of bracing this against my lats, and then I can hit a little bit into it with my hips to give that resistance. I don't have to get this big wind up. Staying here, even if he's hitting pretty hard, I just give it a little bit of twist with my hips, and my shoulder structure should remain intact. If he's, again, doing a giant slap-through motion, I can resist and go with it. Same thing, but he's making impact on target, and then just I'm allowing the follow-through to preserve my joints. And then the low hooks, there's really no good alternative to this, right? If he tries to hit more the center of the pad, we do get a more realistic range, but there's just no good way to hold for the low hook that's very horizontal, kind of over here. Shovel hook, different story, right? You can hold it like this, you can hold it across, and like I mentioned in the solo part, right? This has different advantages over this depending on what I'm trying to work on. Let's say I want him to throw a double hook. I can't do this faster than he can. Look, he's got an MMA glove on. I've got this like 2-pound Thai pad. I can't beat him to the punch, so I just hold this one. Right? But let's say he wants to throw a cross hook, same thing. Maybe I can't do this fast enough, so I hold like this. Now Josh is trying to bury these, so he's I would have time, but if we're working on speed of transition, which is one of the major benefits of focusment training and pad holding, I'll have less time. So let's say I feed this one. I'm going to hold this one over here, right? Or I feed this one and I get it back in time. I can double brace it if I really want to give him something hard to hit against. I can just do it like this, right? And these different holds will optimize different things. This I can adjust the height on, but it's a little bit in front of my body. You see that? If I hold this one, it's more in line with where the target actually is, but this gets a little more uncomfortable. So depends on the context, and it depends on what you're doing before and what you're doing after. The other side's just symmetrical. Can't get there in time. He's just throwing punches and bunches at me, so I'm pre-programming it, making my choice based on the next punch. Overhand right, this can be a little bit tricky depending on how your partner likes to throw it. My default hold is as I showed in the previous section, just like this, right? And even if he has pretty good forward energy, the bracing against my body keeps this pad out of my face, especially if he's actually hitting on target. If he hits kind of up here, this can get a little wonky. We need to get him to hit on target so I can hold correctly, right? If you know your partner kind of misses a lot, this is worth knowing. You earn the right for a good hold, right? If your partner misses a lot, I will tend to open it up a little bit more so that it kind of goes through. But if he's got a good, solid striking foundation, he's hitting on target, I like that. It feels good for him. He can hit through the target, and then you have good follow-up punch opportunities. The overhand left's the same thing. Obviously, we don't see that as much, right? It's kind of more of a looping jab, but same idea. Again, if he really wants to follow through, I just let it go, right? And then you see on impact, I turn my body with it and let it go naturally. If I don't turn my body, I can't let it go. Uppercuts, right? I hold pretty diagonal. It feels good. I can hold very vertical. Those I have to hit into a little bit so you feel something, because I just, as strong as I am, I just don't have enough here without a little bit of momentum. For the elbows, it's very similar to the punch holds, except closer, right? We want to, in non-freestyle Thai pad holding, give them that sense of closeness that's required, right? So as for the punch, when I kind of lean back, I do the same thing with the elbow. I kind of hold it here and give him a little bit of safety margin, right? So if he takes the distance cue off my chest, but then I do give him a few inches, or myself a few inches behind the pad. And then horizontal with the rear, same thing. Diagonal down, just like the overhand right. Just like the overhand left. Diagonal up, just like the uppercut, right? If he misses, right, I have a little bit of safety behind the pad, and his follow through is to my outside. Straight rising vertical elbow, just like this, right? Kind of brace for the knee, but very high. And then it's also good for that inverted left. The other one that you did. Yeah. Let's do it again. Yep. Yeah. So same hold for both the inverted opposite side and the vertical same side. And again, the fundamental principle, perpendicularity and follow through will dictate how you have to hold these. For the body elbow, you can just kind of hold like this, right? Or the horizontal one too. Yeah, right? This isn't so bad. If he's really going to bury it, again, you can bring it, give him a little bit of forward impulse. The danger with that, of course, is you got two moving things and relatively narrow margin for error. So holding it still actually might be safer because if he misses, especially if he's working on, let's say, self-defense style elbows where you got a lot of kind of that female triangle footwork and he's getting past me, right? If he does that and he misses because I've tried to meet him, I'm going to have a problem. So again, you have to have the correct rapport with what your fighter's abilities are. But I like this, it's a nice solid one. Same with the chopping forward elbow, nice solid target, right in front of the chest. Right? You see, like, he was knocking that into me a little bit, right? So you gotta watch out for that. If that's happening, lower the target a little bit. So that now it's hitting chest, right? Not ideal for him, but there's no better compromise. Unless, again, I hold kind of to the side of my body. And now he can really drill through it. So just like the right cross. For the more exotic punches or for more exotic shots that you might have from different martial arts. Straight blast is a really good one. As an example, a lot of times people will hold with the focus mitts like this or like this. With the Thai pads, I find that a little less practical. I like to just hold that as if for the right cross. I can double it up if I want. I can hold it single, especially if I need to feed something with my left hand. Or I can hold it dead center and, you know, just watch that the punch succession doesn't gradually knock this up into your face, but it gives him a nice solid target. It's on center line, so it's on target. So that's a nice way to hold those. For the forearm shots, right? You may have seen a few videos where I'm working with Kurt on those forearm shots. The tough part is how to train it without eating the follow through, right? If he just puts his arm out, right? The forearm shot, if I'm trying to hold for this, you notice I can't hold this one. It's kind of really awkward, right? So, whereas I'm holding typically cross pad for the shot, for the forearm shot, I hold same side. So, if he hits that left forearm, I'm bracing it against my shoulder to give him a nice solid target. I can hold it in space, but you see what happened, right? It just kind of ends up going into your face, even if you think you have the energy to resist it, because that's way more momentum than you think. So I recommend bracing it. Now the problem, of course, is what is the follow-up hold, right? I can't hold for the left side forearm right away, and that's okay. You just have to structure your combos to make sense. Typically, if he hits me with left forearm, let's say right slap is coming right away, there it is, right? So with the forearm shots, you have to make a little more allowances and lose some flexibility in exchange for safety and how that follow-through works. Same with the back fists. I can hold this back fist if I'm way out of range. So if you hit the right back fist, right? It's pretty easy, right? Yeah, okay. Right. And you see how his fist gets past the pad? My face is far enough away, so that's okay. But sometimes we're doing drills where range matters a little bit more, and then we have to hold it just farther in front of us. So if he hits the right back fist, you see I've got some safety margin here. And then this way he can also hit the right back fist with the forearm, and it's still safe for me, right? Just making some compromises because these things have bigger follow through, right? Again, anytime you're hitting with the forearm, the fist is still past that. You gotta put your face where the fist isn't, and then also account for what the follow through is gonna be. So for all the diagonal shots, like the #1 hammer fist and stuff, it's kind of the same as the overhand right? When he hits the hammer fist diagonally, right? Yeah. Right? Same thing. This time, of course, if he's going to hit with the forearm, he can't because I'm holding it right in front of me and that would extend and hit my face. So that kind of hammer fisty forearm, if you want to practice it, I would say you got to hold off to the side, right? And, you know, these are kinds of things that you just got to, that way he can really wail on it and I don't have to worry about my safety. But if he's going to hit with the fist, I can still hold like for the overhand and then I have decent follow through. All right, basic Thai kick, right? Again, we are anticipating a 45-degree angle upwards kick. If he wants to work on that bicep destroying horizontal kick, of course we can do this. Again, heavy bag, probably a better tool for that. But, you know, there are times to work on that. But basic kick, here we go. And then for the switch left, he will find the range to deliver that. For the high kick, again, structure with the outside arm and a little bit of space between the pads is what will keep him from knocking the pad into your head, is this structure as I discussed in the section on the kick hold. For the teeps, right, again, we're like this. And I'm reading the energy he's giving me, right? Sometimes if he does a very pushing one, it's gonna send me back. Sometimes if he does a very striking one, I can stand my ground a little bit. I am gonna, again, have to flex my abs. This thing of meeting it doesn't work as well with the teep. There's just too much forward energy. So you kind of just have to grin and bear it. if you're having a weak stomach day, right, or you just had like 3 coffees before you came in to hold pads,
On her house.
you're just gonna have to let your partner know rather than barf it up on the mats. But you know, it's really hard to get around this one. I mean, one way is to hold it more at chest level, but that's not really as good for him. But that is one way. If we want to work on high teeps, again, just like the cross hold. And that works for the rear teep as well. And then for the front teep, if I want to present a target, he can hit that medium hard, right? No target, which is what I prefer. Of course, he hits it with absolute control, and it's just about target practice. The side teep, again, we are, instead of holding like this, holding diagonally so the blade of the foot doesn't slip through.
So this side.
Yeah, so the side teep is the teep version of the side kick, basically.
So no more.
And like the teep, it will have different degrees of pushing me back versus striking feel. So for the half shin, half knee kick, you can hold like for the Thai kick if you wish. I don't like that because it's a little bit vague. Sometimes you just catch it because you catch it. I like holding as if for the diagonal knee, actually. Right? It's a more precise target, and it allows me to, quite frankly, give him more resistance because the Thai hold, this pad's not doing a lot if he's hitting with his knee, so you might as well get it involved. Nice. If you're holding for an art like Savate, I prefer a single pad because, again, it gives him more clarity and there's less probability of the kick vanishing behind the pad because you don't really know which pad he's going to pick if he's hitting with his foot. So I just like to give him one, right? I like the cross hold for the round kicks or the fuetes or any kind of snapping kick art, right? Just hold this one. You can support it if you want. You can hold this side if you want to. Again, depending on what the follow-up is, right? It may be that this one makes sense because he's following it up with something else. And maybe this one makes sense because he's following it up with something else. The side kicks are again similar, right? I can hold like this for the side kick. I can hold out to the side for side kick. I really like this if people are just learning this kick because missing doesn't have a lot of consequence for me unless he's missing by a truly obscene amount. In which case, we keep this pad over the groin. But in general, you should be pretty good just flashing the pad out to the side. And of course, for different levels of kick, if he wants to throw that very dramatic side kick high line, this is going to be a safer hold, right? And again, I lean back from it to give him a little bit of clearance.
Sure.
Spin kicks, the main thing about spin kicks is because of the weight of the Thai pad, I tend not to give feedback, I just let it through. Because the spin kicks in general are designed to hit the head. And if you throw a head kick, unless the guy has Brock Lesnar neck muscles, his head's going to go with the kick. And so rather than, if he throws the spin kick, I apologize to Josh, it's going to look pretty awkward. If he throws the spin kick, and I really kind of resist it, he's recovering remarkably well, all things considered. But it's going to be an awkward thing. It's not how it actually happens, assuming that that was a good kick. If you get a range problem, you get hung up, that's one thing. But if your targeting was good, that's not typically how you would recover from hitting the actual target. You have to just let it through. And again, leaning the head back in case there's a minor range problem. But you see, it allows him a comfortable follow through. It allows him to progress to the next attack in a more natural fashion, assuming the hit was good. Low spin kicks, like leg kicks, maybe, but you can also just do them. Depending on how much balance your partner has, actually, this isn't bad. Everyone's least favorite kick, in my experience, is
I didn't know we were getting ready for that.
is the spinning low revers. And he's going to throw it to the correct side that I'm holding this time.
Yeah, that too.
Right? Sometimes This will give him more confidence to hit through the target. Because that kick requires some momentum unless you're really on your game and have been practicing it a lot. So unlike with the low round kicks where you can really just dance off your partner, the low revers can be very challenging to do unless you allow your partner to develop some momentum, in which case the Thai pad maybe isn't the worst idea.
Sorry.
Basically every other kick is some variation of that. Even the very kind of arcane or FMA oriented inverted kicks, right, or the JKD kind of inverted groin kick, either hold nothing or just kind of hold the pad there, right? It's all about perpendicularity and safety of follow through. So our basic level combinations are essentially one hip rotation followed by the opposite hip rotation. So the more intermediate or let's say later stage of beginner would involve resetting or hitting with the same hip rotation twice, which would involve either resetting the body or some kind of footwork that allows us to do that. The basic level hitting is counter motion with a couple of notable exceptions. It's super important to be able to throw a double jab, and sometimes there are shots which effectively set our hips in the correct position. One prime example is after the cross, we're actually primed for that same side knee. So these I would still consider basic combos because there's not a lot of unnatural hip resetting or resetting angle and position. So we're just going to run through them. You're going to find this in the ebook if you want to follow along. I'm going to try to get through them pretty quickly just so you can see 1 or 2 reps of each one and how I'm making minor adjustments for range and position. Jab cross, both on this pad. If I want low high, so low jab, high cross. Then high jab, low cross. And then double low, is just going to be here. Or if I want to feed them in the middle, too low, just here. Right? Kind of dealer's choice on that one. You can also do cross jab. Or if I want to do the crisscross, I can do this, right? Or cross jab this way. This is going to be more natural if he wants to circle out on the jab. So he'll throw a straight cross, circle on the jab. That's a more natural angle for him. Again, circle on the jab. So cross double jab. You see, and I kind of turn with him so he can maintain that idea. Good. Jab, right uppercut. So high jab here, right uppercut. Right, so I'm going to hold this so you can hit it pretty forward. Then jab overhand, same idea. So you notice I'm not starting from down here, even though this is what I would call neutral. I'm starting from kind of halfway up so I can get it there fairly quickly. This is in the context of me still calling out the drills. If we're doing free flow, this might mean something different. But you don't want it all the way down here, it takes too long, right? So if he throws, he's slowing down for me because I can't get there in time. So just start from higher up. Good. Then we're going to do cross hook. So pretty simple box. Low cross, high hook. Again. Then cross low hook. Good. And then 1, 2, 3. So make the box. Then he can do 1, 2, 3, 2. Same box. If I'm having a little bit of difficulty with his power, I open up on that last 2 a little bit. You see that right when he threw the 3, I moved my heel a little bit to open the body. And then 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 being the uppercut with the right hand. So you see the first rep of that I did, I held it pretty vertical, but I saw he was hitting pretty forward, so I changed it to the diagonal hold. Right? Sometimes we want him to adjust, sometimes we adjust, depending on how much we care for exactly what we're doing that day. And then 1, 4, 3, 2. So jab, uppercut, hook, cross. So jab, uppercut, hook, cross. Still very natural, still counter motion. Again, I can open up a little bit if I need to open for the power of that cross. Pretty basic. Jab, overhand, right, left, uppercut. So jab, overhand, right, left, uppercut. One more. Again, you notice I was holding this pad here so I could just flip it up when he was done the jab. Left hook, right hook, jab, cross. So we don't throw a lot of right hook as beginners, but why not? So left hook, right hook, jab, cross. Right, again, left hook, right hook, jab, cross. So it's just going to be bam, 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 bam. Main thing is to get out of his way. And then of course, it's all just variations of this, right? Rather than jab, it could be another left hook. Rather than cross, it could be uppercut, right? So watch, I'll just call it out. It's not on my list, but left hook, right hook, jab, uppercut. So left hook, right hook, jab, uppercut. Right? So it's all just counter motion for him. So for the kick combos at the basic level, we're again in general alternating sides, with the exception of course, you want to be able to double up on your same side kick right away, especially in Muay Thai. And transitioning from the straight kick to the round kick, there's enough of a natural directions change so that it doesn't feel like an advanced thing, because you have to switch your hips in order to even execute the technique. For example, if I'm throwing the left teep, I can step into the right kick, pretty natural. I can also step into the left kick because I have to reset myself anyway. So same side kicking depends on what the actual technique is, and we'll just run through them right here. So right kick, left kick. And then of course, you can do left kick, right kick. So you notice that after his left kick, he's not just stepping to the correct range to execute his follow-up kick. Now just double kick on the same side. And you notice he's not retracting his kick all the way. He's landing the side of the left foot. So you cut down on the time between kicks. Same with the double left kick. And then since you can develop this skill fairly early in the student's skill set, for your conditioning classes, you can sometimes do things like 5 in a row. Right? Once they can do 2, they can kind of do as many until they get tired, really. And then we're going to work on the straight kick to the round kick, so left teep, left kick. So you see he's going to land into the switch kick as he did there. If I want him to learn how to march, because let's say the teep pushed me back, you see how he had to more step into that kick. So sometimes I will force him to really push me back, so make this a pushing kick teep. And then that's a very natural follow through. Again, please. Sometimes I'm going to alter the range on purpose. I was actually a little slow on, it's not his, I was actually slow on changing the range. If he weren't waiting for me, he could have gotten there. So if I want to do that, I really have to be on the ball. Right? Or I can stand my ground, and then now it becomes a close range kick. So this is how we advance the drill very quickly. Pretty basic combo. And then same thing for the lead teep right kick. Lead teep right kick.
Yes, sir.
He can land pretty much in place if I don't back up, or he can chase me down. And you see, pretty straightforward. Kick followed by the teep, harder to do because you now have to reset your hips and square up. So right kick, left teep. So now try to do it just from bending. Good, yeah. So you see now there's less wasted movement. And so that was a pretty attacking teep. This combo is very good for working on him using it as a stop kick. So I'm going to give him some forward pressure so he really has to get there anchored sufficiently to give me enough forward energy to stop me. So it doesn't have to be a dramatic push forward, even just standing your ground. Sometimes defensively, even if I'm not rushing him, he just does that as insurance, right? Keep me away after that big ground kick. Sometimes it is, get away from me. And you see, he has to read that quickly. To get a short range teep, he's got to get his knee higher. Right? And even if he kind of pushes himself back, that's still a decent kick from me, even though he's bouncing back. And more importantly, he's kept me out of range for his own safety, which is the real point of using that combination in that way. We can do left kick, left side teep. So if you want a more Thai flavor, we can do left Thai kick, left side teep. So on that one, either he backs up out of range after that left kick, or he sends me backwards and follows up. You see, it's pretty fast, right? Or we can do the more French boxing version of that. Left fuerte, left side kick. I'm not even putting his foot down. Nice. Or I can hold that like this if he wants to work on that side kick being a little more powerful. Nice. And then the spin kicks, as we mentioned before. So left kick, he's going to follow through so that he's planted ready for that spin kick. So let's say he does left fuerte. Right, again. So he's making a very deliberate choice. And that's hard to do if he does left high kick. If he does left high kick and I really shut off his power, it's difficult, right? So if you wanted to do left high kick into the spin kick, I would need to make space for him. Right, that's going to feel a little more natural. And also that's how you would actually apply the combo, right? If I stood my ground after you throw a left high kick, a spin kick's not maybe your best idea, right? Often it's a result of you actually being overcommitted to the kick rather than trying to pull off something fancy just for its own sake, which you should do when you're just having fun, right? But if you want to think about these combos of having some measure of functionality, right? It's often if he throws the left kick, and then let's say he whiffs at English, stuff like that. I love it when he does it without me telling him what I'm going to do. It kind of just illustrates that this is how this really functions. So we're now going to look at the full combos between hands and feet. The biggest challenge once we add the kicking and the punching is the constant adjustment of range. Josh is going to do a lot of this naturally, so I'm not going to have to coach it out of him, right? But I'll try to make a few comments so that you kind of put it in your own memory banks about when you're holding for a beginner, you might have to spend a little bit more time repping out that kind of transition. Josh, I can tell him once and he'll just fix it. Of course, if you're teaching a beginner, you're going to need to invest a little bit more time. But here we go. So, jab, right, kick. So you notice when I'm holding for the jab, my right pad is already here. So it's a short trip to get to that kick hold. And then cross left kick. And then we can do the same side versions of that, jab, left kick. Because it's a switch, again, I count it as not exactly contrary to counter motion, because at this level, we're still asking for the switch before the left kick. Or you can do that. Or you could do it with no switch, at which case it does become a more advanced idea. but kind of fundamentally the same. You notice my pad's already there, ready to go if he does that. And so if you're working more free flow with your fighter and you're calling that combo, it's not a bad idea to just have the pad ready to go. So kind of dealer's choice. If I get there in time, good. If not, this is already there. Same with cross right kick. So the big thing with cross right kick is, if he wants to hit both at perfect range, I will hold them both at perfect range. If he wants to work on the body mechanics of following the cross with the kick, which is typically thrown because I'm retreating from the cross, I hold this pad farther than I normally would recommend, so it's fluid for him. See how he goes very naturally right into that kick. Whereas if I hold it properly, he kind of needs a second to make sure the range is correct. And he's kind of shortening up a little bit. So that's a major variation of this idea, is when you're being fluid on the strong side, you might want to try this. He's hitting at perfect range for his kick now, and that cross also feels like it's thrown in a good range. And then 1, 2, 3, kick either side. So hold the box. By the way, depending on what your pad holding session is like, he can throw the kick that I'm holding, or I can react to the kick that he's going to throw. If, let's say, I go 1, 2, 3, kick, I just watch him. Or he's going to throw what I flash. And you notice now, he needs a moment to read my cue. So different flavor, giving him a different kind of workout depending on what the parameters are. 1, 2, 4 counts, so that's jab, cross, then some combination of left kick, right kick, so on and so forth. So 1, 2, double right, 1, 2, double left, 1, 2, right, left, 1, 2, left, right. Fairly straightforward. I can hold this again either here, or if I want to make it fluid, so let's say 1, 2, right, left, I can do this. He wants to really do the fluid follow through from the cross to the right kick. Right, so whenever you have that right cross, right kick piece in there, you can adjust your pad holding accordingly. Then we have what I call the standard Thai 4 counts for our universe, right? Feel free to call it something else in your head. That's going to be kick, 2 punches, kick. So right kick, 2 punches, left kick. So it's going to be cross, left hook, right cross, left kick. So sometimes, especially in our association, a very common way to do this 4 count is to step off diagonally after the right kick to not only create angle, but stay in range. Step off that way. You notice that changes the angle for me, so I turn to face him if I see him hitting it like that. And then for the left kick, either he will adjust to me, where you see him kind of shoot that right foot back to stay in the correct range, or he'll march into it if he sees me back up. And the advantage of that right hook is it's pretty easy, even if you're late on the read, to make up for it with the push shuffle. So, and then what we call the odds, so right kick both times. To make this particularly comfortable for him, I can open up a little bit. I'll often do that for a final power kick. So while this might be good for kicks in the middle and at the beginning of a combination, to give someone a really comfortable, super powerful kick where they feel like they can really put everything into it, I will sometimes open up, and that's a nice way also to create range so that he doesn't have to adjust to me, but he can hit very fluidly and naturally. So after that, let's say right, left, right, I'll step back so he can really bury that right kick. And then kind of same with the left side, but it'll be a less of a range change. He's hitting nice and flush into my body now. So it kind of just has a different feel. Some people like how that feels to finish off. So we have the elbow forecounts, which are going to be right elbow, left knee, left elbow. So alternating. That's often thrown as diagonal down with the rear, horizontal with the lead. And then the other side, except he doesn't alter. The left still stays horizontal. Right, left, right. So that can be simulating a straight knee attack, or after the elbow, a clinch into the knee. We're dispensing with the clinch for now for convenience and rapidity. So now we have throwing the knees and punches and kicks all together. And as I mentioned at the beginning, because after the punch our hips are squared up, following with the same side knee can feel actually quite natural. So for example, right cross, right knee. I have this pad already in place. And you notice that unlike for the right kick, following through when I'm holding this correct distance actually feels best for him. And I'm trying to get this there in time. If I don't, no big deal. And then for the jab, left knee, he's going to switch on the jab or after. So Josh, switch after first. So I have all day to get to that one. But he can also switch on the jab, which is why I recommend having this pad ready. Good. So now we're going to put it all together. So after holding very comfortable right cross, right knee, I'm going to open up for him to get that right kick in a good distance, because this just feels great, right? And so sometimes I'm not always going to demand of my fighter absolute technical perfection on the distance for the sake of just giving him some fun hitting, right? So we're going to open up after that knee. Now, if I am training the fighter to kind of be a little bit more functionally oriented, the way he achieves that is he shoves me with his left hand after the knee. Right? That also feels good because now that becomes countering motion, right? That push with his left hand opens him up to really deliver that right kick. And then we can do the jab, knee, kick as well. So we have jab, knee, left kick. And again, I opened up for him. Or if he wants to just kind of barrel me out of the way. Yeah, those. So if he wants to just barrel me out of the way, he's going to push with his right hand. And then we have the punch, knee, elbow. So this time I don't have to open up, I stay right in the pocket. Right? He can do right elbow, right? Let's see what that looks like. And if I'm having difficulty getting there in time, or if he's just really trying to blitz that, I just rely on one pad for the knee so I can get there in time with my other hold. The timing, if that were to happen, would probably be 1, 2, and something like that. You see, he's not even waiting to land, so I have to get the pad there in time. And then we can do the other ways when you do kick to punch to knee. So left kick, right cross, right knee. So kick, cross, knee. So after the kick, he's going to make sure he lands in the correct distance to fire that punch knee. Good. And this one is kind of a variation of the 4 count. This is going to be right kick, right cross, left hook, right kick. So unlike cross kick, which flows pretty naturally, kick cross is slightly more advanced. So this is kind of beginning of intermediate, end of beginner, I would say. So he's going to go right kick, right cross, left hook, right kick. So the end of that combo is still counter motion. It's just after that kick, learning to land, step together, and march into that cross. Good. And you see, unlike for the cross kick where I held forward to get the transition smooth, holding correct distance is the thing to do now because it's starting with the longer weapon. It's easy to march in to the correct distance for the cross. And then we'll just finish up with a couple jab, right knee, left kick, right cross. So that's going to be jab, right knee, left kick, right cross. So that's still altering sides, but the complexity of the weapon combination now has just kind of been bumped up just a little bit. If the transition's a little fast, I can hold for the jab here. So you go jab, right knee, left kick, cross. Again. Or I can hold this side, which is the more natural side. And here, Josh was doing most of the hard work for the distance, allowing me to just stay stationary. Again, alternately, I can do the adjusting to make it feel either more natural or more unnatural for him, depending on what we're trying to focus on. And final one for this beginner section, we're just going to do jab, left knee. So again, same side, but it feels natural because we're going to switch on the knee. So jab, left knee, and then follow up with right kick jab. So, and that jab is to get out, right? So you're just going to retreat on that one. So jab, left knee, right kick, jab, right? And you notice I'm making space on the kick on that one, just to show you a different way to hold it, right? So jab, left knee, make space, and then he's just getting out behind that jab. So there we have a whole plethora of what I call beginner combos, which we just burned through. Please pay attention to the little comments I make. That's kind of the meat of this video, in my opinion, right? You can read the combos on paper, kind of deciphering what I'm doing, how I'm making adjustments, why things work one way. I hope that that's some of the value you take out of this video. And of course, I want to thank Josh for being a great hitter for me. So now we're going to work on the intermediate punch combos. The idea here is there's some resetting of the hips or some angling out to make this actually work well. By the way, you can advance all the beginner drills in the same way, right? There's nothing that says you can't angle out on the beginner combos, but these are going to require a little bit more movement and a little bit more awareness of how your hips have to reset to make them function properly. Okay, so for the jab, uppercut, right hook, left hook, typically it's going to be two fast pops with the left, so I got to be prepared to transition very quickly. Right? And then if he throws the right hook and the left hook, he can throw that right in front of me if he wants. Or he can use these to angle out, and this drill's pretty symmetric, you can go either way. And you notice I'm trying to track him. Yeah, and he doesn't have to tell me which way he's going. I got to keep my eyes on my partner. He can also throw those low, right? Body hooks are very common, especially when you're flanking to the outside. These, of course, he does have to tell me about, or not hit them hard, right? So let's say he does the right hook, and I know the combo starts with my left pad, so I start with my right pad in position. Right? And then if he wants, he can hit both hooks here as long as I slide this along, right? I don't have time to do this. Right? Yeah, so see, I just kind of turn with him so he has a reasonable target here. Or he can go low-high. So that's a nice way to get this done. You have to resist the urge to really bury these because the pad doesn't distribute the force the same way the belly pad does. So sometimes this kind of bites in you a little bit, especially if he's hitting hard. So right jab, cross, right uppercut, left hook, same idea. You're just kind of going to different sides. I'm going to hold 1-2 with this one, then the uppercut, then the left hook. right? So I'm holding 3 punches with the right. And then he can throw that low if he wants, so jab cross low, right? And then I'm going to have to kind of pivot that over to catch that uppercut. So the jab, double right hook, left hook, there's a real temptation, I was doing it earlier naturally, of holding these a little bit farther away. Try to hold a little bit closer so he gets used to either having to throw a long hook or having to get right close to you, because that is what's required to hit this for real. Because it's hard to go from high to low well, he can hit that right hook low and then high, but he will have to wait for me for just a second. Right, that's a very common way that people kind of just angle out with that right hook to the body, and it buys them some time to throw the other punches. Okay. You put in a little bit, hit it diagonally in. Yeah, that's nice. One more. Nice. Yeah, so again, some of these you're going to have to let your partner know in advance what order we're doing them in, or he can tell by the way I'm holding it, right? And some of these we can flow pretty naturally because I can just follow what he's doing. So jab, double right hook, left cross means he's probably going to be angling out to my left so he can throw the left cross down the pipe. We go here, and he's using those to get away. And I can take a step back to make sure that left cross feels like it's in a comfortable range. Especially if I'm holding that right hook close to my face, by the time he's there for the left cross, he needs some more space. Good. Double left hook, right cross. So again, he's probably going to get out to one side or the other. These are just ideas to work on your flanking, right? So double left hook, right cross. So I see I turned a little bit to face him for that cross. He can go this way, double left hook, right cross. So if he's going to his right this time, right? And then again, I'm not doing in this video ways of application. You're going to have to imagine a little bit how this would actually function, but either way, he's working on his movement with his hooks and then throwing straight punches to follow up. Either when I've turned to face him, or if somehow he's really got me overwhelmed, great, throw straight punches from his flank. So here's a little heavier hitting combo, cross, double uppercut, right hook, left cross. He's going to probably flank me on that hook because that's the most natural motion. So you notice I'm switching my feet probably sometime while he's doing the right hook. And so sometimes I do leave that a little bit out there in space to represent where I was while I get set up to absorb his next shot. And I need to get there early because to absorb a left cross, I can't be getting there and then him pushing me farther into it. I want to try to get there so I can push into it, and that's what's making this drill exceptionally challenging. Because that's kind of fewer reps holding left cross, right? So you got to really get there in time to preserve your own body. Okay, so jab, right uppercut, left elbow, right elbow. So here I'm really letting him get close to me and leaning my body back, my head back a little bit, so that he's feeling that range relative to the rest of my body. Right? And that's, of course, a pretty close uppercut. It's not a long uppercut because he wants to follow that up with elbow. So he's getting nice and close before he drops those elbows on me. Now here's something of a more fast-paced patty cake-like drill. Just wanted to show that you can do this with Thai pads. You, of course, have to get there pretty quickly. It's not going to be as fast as focus mitts, right? I just mechanically cannot move these as quickly as focus mitts. So the advantage of that is he can do a patty cake-like drill, putting a little bit more into it. So the nice thing about this pad on these patty cake drills is if he wants to hit a different one, or if I hold it slightly wrong, there's enough on it so he can get a piece of it. right? It's not a huge deal when you're doing it with the Thai pads. With the focus mitts, you actually need to hold it right. Otherwise, you're hitting the edge of the mitt, you're hitting the back of his hand. The nice thing about this is he can actually clip the edge, and it's okay as long as you're not blasting it in my face. Yeah. Good. Okay, so for kick-only combos, we're going to do these a little more Savate style because it's a little easier to show, and also just to show a different aspect of how you can still use Thai pads in your training. You can, of course, convert most of these to their Muay Thai equivalents or whatever your art is. So start off, left kick, spinning, right side kick. So remember, for the side kick, because of the blade of the foot's going to come in sideways, I'm going to hold that a little more diagonally so the foot doesn't accidentally slip through. Left kick, I'm just going to hold midline. Good.
Sorry, Roy.
Good. So, you notice I'm kind of angling my body a little bit to give it a little bit more space. I can also hold it this way. Right? If I want to do a single pad hold, if I want to like test him with my left hand or something, this is decent. Right? And then he's just following through, sighting, and then hitting. Double left kick, left side kick. So a nice way to hit the double left kick is to enter, hit the leg first, and then hit the body. Again, because I prefer to hold with no equipment on, he's just going to tap that, hit this one, and then left side kick. The leg is a pretty natural one, right? So here, here, and then right here. So I'm going to hold that in place for him, right? And bend it a little bit so that he doesn't worry about accidentally straightening my leg. And of course, he's hitting above the knee. And so just kind of tapping it in there right now. The other way to hit that is to hit the side kick middle. And in this case, I'll probably hold this one, or again, this one. So if he hits here, here, right, this way, I can get, you see how I can alter the range here, and I'm still just going with the kick. Right, so pretty easy, even if he's just driving right through it. Or I can hold this and just try to get him to produce a more solid side kick. Nice. So pretty straightforward. Left reverse frontal, or just kind of left reverse crescent kick, depending on where you come from. And then his right coup de pied bas. So this is a kick that you tend to use more with the shoe on, because with the bottom of your foot, or even with your heel, against his bottom of his leg, it's not really going to do a lot, aside from distract him. Every time I do this in sparring for fun, I just end up getting bruises on the bottom of my foot. But it's a really good drill to do if you do more of the Savate style or self-defense styles. If you want to work on this kick, I am going to take it away when he does that so that he can put a little more energy into it, but not worry about hurting me or hurting himself. So we're going to start with the reverse frontal, where again, I let the pad go so that it's a natural feel for him.
Left side, right?
And then follow up with left kick. Right? So that frontal is a short range technique, which is why the follow up with the right works. But the left kick can be a long range technique, so between the two of us, we've got to figure out the range adjustment. Right? So perhaps I'm running away and he's just trying to get that last groin shot in. Right? And then of course we're just holding middle because it's easier to hold middle. Right? Or he can work on escaping after that, and then he'll put the left kick low to the inside of my thigh. So we're going here, escape, and then he gets out and just puts that here. Notice not a lot of pad holding, right? But it's just a good combo to get our minds thinking about how this works. Left chassé bas, left revers latéral, right kick. So his hips are already turned over from the side kick, so that crescent kick is relatively natural. Then get out and kick the right kick. So I can hold this pad here if I want, give him a little bit more to to hit against. I can hold this one for his last kick. Nice. Or I can hold the cross style. Right? This will allow him to kick a little harder, right? But each one works. The pad here, I tend to not like it again because he can't drill it anyway, right? In fact, the problem is if he tries to drill it like this and it makes me flex funny, it's going to be a problem. So by not even presenting a target, I kind of like that, but it does let him hit medium. So just kind of dealer's choice. Maybe sometimes one makes more sense than the other. Jumping right kick, right chasse bas. So for the jumping right kick, I'm going to hold 2 just cause, and then he's going to hit the left kick middle, right? So he's going to here, and then right chasse bas, he's going to angle out and hit it here. Nice. And again, I'm presenting him with a nice turned target. If I have time, I'll even turn into him, so it's safer even more for me. Right? Knowing that relative to me, he was trying to take this one, right? I like the 2 pads because with the jumping kicks, it's a little less predictable. You can hold the one if he wants to hit it very Savate style. Right? And again, I can also hold the pad down here if I want to give him a more concrete idea of the target. And here, we're starting off with the jumping kick, a lot for attribute development, right? Without any kind of follow-up or introductory idea, leading off with a jump kick, I don't know, right? Especially with the rear leg, right? Jump kick with the lead leg is actually pretty natural, but a jump kick with the rear leg, I mean, maybe if you're kind of coming in and then doing this, but it's more for attribute development and just having fun.
Great counter technique to the rear low kick.
Yeah, okay, there you are. I think we did a video on that. Right? But that's not an entry, right? It's more of a drill format. But it develops the attribute of doing this, right? So again, attribute development. And then we'll just polish this off with Teep flying knee, right? So I'm going to hold here, Teep, flying knee. This is just, quite frankly, fun to hit, and it's good conditioning, right? And I can hold it at various heights depending on what we're working on for him. Right, if we're working on accuracy, right, the flying knee is going to come between here and here. If I really want him to work on his vertical, I'll just hold it higher. So, but that's just a nice way to develop some intermediate kicking ideas, and we'll have a more comprehensive list of ideas in the full combos. So, the full combinations. So here we are going to be dynamically varying range and angle. So, for example, the first one, jab, right hook, left kick. We'll hold jab, right hook, left kick. So he's going to have to find the range, or I'm going to have to find the range. That right hook, if it's a short one, you see how he's naturally leaning back? That's fine. If he wants to really put in a forward momentum kick, I'll move back. Or he can throw a long right hook into the left kick. Right? So after the jab, you don't need to move in. You can throw a long right hook, and then he has the correct range. Right kick, Superman punch into the left kick. So right here, he sets it up with that right kick. He fakes the right kick into the Superman punch and gets off to the side with the left kick. Again. Good. Or he can escape and angle up with the left kick to the leg. Or again, I can back up because that Superman punch really caught me and he has to march forward after that punch. Yeah. Right? So sometimes if that Superman punch catches me off guard, he might want to advance. And so I'm going to back up, and so he chases me down with the left kick. You see I'm really push shuffling to make space. And then he gets to work on adjusting the footwork. Of course, the next level is for me to not tell him which one I'm doing, and then he has to adjust. We can sort that out on our own later. Jab, right knee, right kick. So I'm going to go jab, right knee, right kick. So you see I'm cross holding so that this is already here in case he really wants to put it in fast. But I I'm still trying to get this here for the supported hold. And then I'm backing up for the right kick because we're changing range. Sometimes I can push shuffle, sometimes I can just open up. Left leg kick, right spinning elbow. I'm going to lean back so that he has some space. Good, and he can put that diagonal down as well. Good. And then he can either work on spinning all the way through and getting out, or he can come back the way he came. Okay, left kick, right knee, right elbow. So here I'm holding on this side, so he's going to switch Thai kick in the kicking range into right elbow. Okay, so this is a nice feeling power combo, right? Left kick, right knee, right elbow. And again, you see I'm kind of putting it up and leaning back so he has space for that elbow. And then we can do the other side. Right kick, left knee, left elbow. Nice. So now we're going to do all right side, and then it's going to again talk about range change. Right? So after the kick, move range for the knee, and then see he's automatically making space for that cross. And again, I can change some of that range, so I can charge him, and then that feels short. And then you see if I back out, that feels long. That's a very confusing thing for him, and then he has to make all these micro adjustments. So right kick, right hook, double left hook, and then right cross. So this one, we're combining some of the punching ideas. So this one, we're continuing the angling ideas from the punch combos, but integrating it with the kicks now, rather than just all hands. On some level, these might even be easier to actually execute because that right kick has higher priority in terms of me having to deal with it. If he's just throwing these looping punches, I kind of sometimes have more wherewithal to counter. Whereas that kick coming in, because it's just a higher priority attack, I'm going to need to deal with it somehow, which is going to occupy my mind and body for him to continue moving in space. So integrating these ideas will tend to make these angling off ideas more effective. So another pretty basic power hitting combo here. So I put this in intermediate because we're following two same side, cross, knee, cross. So two left side, two right side.
So it's going to be...
Yeah. Good, right? So after that left kick, learning how to reset your hips to land into the left hook is what we're working on here. Good. Or you can even circle out with that left hook. If I hold it for good. Once more. And then so Josh right now is hitting these like bam, 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 right? Which is great. He can double up the timing of it sometimes to really add precision. The most natural one, in my opinion, is cross knee, right? So if he does two pretty heavy attacks, and then go bam, bam, and then finish it off with another power attack. Right? And that's why I have this pad here, in case he's faster than I can get to it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, you gotta have these pads ready so he can work on his timing.
Yes, sir.
So this is this drill, right kick, left teep, right flying knee, right elbow. Again, a range changing drill. Thinking long into short actually. So right kick, I'm gonna switch to this, sorry. So right kick, gonna switch into this with a teep, right flying knee, land into right elbow. So the nice thing here, of course, is from the flying knee, we're landing down into that down elbow. The momentum of our weight is going to add more force to that elbow. So he's trying to time his elbow for just after he lands so that he can continue the momentum of his body mechanics right away, right? If he fires too early, he can't follow through with his hips. If he lands too late, it's just late. It's actually not bad per se, but he's giving me more time than maybe he might otherwise have to. So the timing we're really looking for, nice, is just that landing into the elbow. And then again, I can play with the range here, which would really make it harder. So after the right kick, he's using that as a stop kick as I'm coming forward. Now, in real life now, you don't follow a stop kick with a flying attack. But again, attribute development, right? Can you? And then if you can, then of course doing it in less pressure is going to be that much easier.
Sir.
We can do the other side of this one, right, which is going to feel a little bit different. We're still going to follow that left flying knee with right elbow though, because we're going to land left knee forward, left leg forward. So left kick, then right teep, then left flying knee into right elbow, because we're going to land forward. That's the natural way to land.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this holds a little bit tougher because rather than the natural unfolding here, because I naturally hold teep like this, I gotta race to get here on time. Nice. Try to hit that more into me. I noticed if you hit it past me,
yes,
it's actually harder for me to get there.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this is also harder because sometimes the energy is going in different ways. If he hits this past me, I gotta circle it around to get in front of me again. Good. And that knee, you notice, that's actually knocking me into place, which is actually what you want if you're actually hitting this combo for real, right? The momentum of that knee, I'm controlling my descent to get that pad in place, because that's just the kind of knee that Josh has. So he's going to go jab, 2 uppercuts, left hook into the right knee, diagonal in. So he's going to, okay, so on this combo, he's going to circle out behind his left hook so that he's flanked me for that right knee up the pipe. So jab, double uppercut, double. There you go. So that cross knee, that diagonal, just feels great to hit. Right? He's hitting a nice solid target so he can really bury that as hard as he can. Pretty safe though with this cross hold. Even if he misses on my outside line.
Yes, sir. Okay.
And then we can add a kick on the end of that, which means after he's backed me up, I'm going to unfold into this kick.
Yes, sir.
Good. He's got a nice flush kick to follow up with. Good, and then from this side, looks nice. Good. So for the other side, quite similar, right? I'd like get that pad there in time. Okay, so now we got left diagonal knee, toss knee cross, left elbow, right diagonal knee. In here we're just working on his ability to move around me in different ways. So I'm turning to face him, and you notice if I don't hold the elbow, we can keep going. Nice. Nice. Yeah, and that combo here, again, just putting together pieces, putting together ways to move, ways to flank, ways to hit same side twice, which are going to develop our attributes. Figure out which one of these are useful for you combatively, and combatively whether that's self-defense or sport, but this is a great set of drills to expand your thinking. Hopefully I've given you some pieces to learn how to put together your own combos with these basic ideas.
It's also fun at parties.
So I thank Josh here, and of course MKG Detroit, Make sure you check out kickoflegend.com for a bunch of free content. And this is what Kick of Legend. Keep your chin down, elevate your striking.